6:06 PM on the 16th, and I call the Finance Committee meeting to order.
It's 6:07 PM on Thursday, January 16th, 2025. I am calling to order the select board meeting. It's a joint meeting with FinCom. We're meeting in the lower level of the Rutland Public Library. We are on Zoom and being recorded, live streamed on local access television and recorded for re-airing on local access television, YouTube, other social media outlets as well. For select board, we're a 3-member board tonight, Paul, Jen, and myself. Currently FinCom is Pete, Ted, Lynn, and Karen. So neither board is a full member board at this point. Moving into our agenda, we have new business. We have the discussion of the warrant article for the special town meeting, and hopefully the intent is to make recommendations. So as
We have minutes to approve first.
Oh, you do? Okay, sorry, then go ahead. So I'm not looking at your agenda, I'm sorry. Thank you, Karen.
So do I have a motion to accept the minutes from December 19th?
I will make the motion to accept the minutes of September
December 19th.
December 19th. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes accepted.
Sorry about that, I have your agenda up now too, sorry. So moving into new business, the discussion of the warrant article for the special town meeting. As the FinCom, I believe, knows, the select board voted in the middle of December to call a special town meeting. Given the challenges around the citizens petition, the process was not followed appropriately, so the citizens petition at town meeting in this fall could not have been voted on. The select board called a special town meeting, and at our last select board meeting, which was joint with planning board, we worked on the language for the warrant article in collaboration with legal. Obviously, legal has provided us with the language. It's essentially the same as the Article 10 at the fall town meeting. And there were some edits, just updating MGL references as well. It is Article 1 to see if the town will vote to amend Article 12, the marijuana establishments, Section 89, restrictions and prohibitions of the town of Rutland zoning bylaws by deleting the strike through text and inserting the bold text as follows. So it's essentially updating the number of retail licenses from 1 to 2, and it would still need a special permit. It would still need to follow the special permitting process through planning board and everything. So it's not a guarantee that a second retail shop would come in. It is simply just an option if there is. The original petitioner, I believe, is still interested. But again, that's not a guarantee that it would go through either the special permitting process in town or through this Cannabis Control Commission at the state. It's a zoning bylaw change. It would require 2/3 vote. If I saw planning board on Tuesday opened their public meeting, they continued it because they only had 3 of their 5 members present as well. So
Only 2 of them voted to move it to the 28th. The other one did not.
Right. So that is.
So, I'm sorry, does that mean that there was no action taken?
No action taken.
Thank you.
So we have the special meeting called. This is the warrant article. And we are here to discuss and make recommendation. If you recall, in the fall, planning board, select board, and FinCom all had favorable recommendations for the same change, to increase the number of retail LMEs. So is there conversation?
Yes, I'd like to understand why legal was called in to give us 3 more choices. We spent money in the fall, and then we spent more money in December with 3 choices again. So what changed in that short period of time? What's effectively less than a month?
So legal wasn't called, they called us.
Okay?
And what changed was the municipal law unit of KP Law has been closely following also the municipal law unit from the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General's office has started issuing what they're calling warnings to municipalities that have language that we, very similar language to what we had for Article 10. So I think in recognition of some of the discussion at the select board level, KP Law called and kind of gave us a heads up on that. And I then asked Roger from KP Law to provide some of the options for the community to consider. So those options were discussed at the board level, and that's where they came up with this preferred option.
And there's no options here, this is just the one.
Correct. Yep, so this is the warrant as drafted and decided by a mutual decision of the planning board and select board.
Okay,
I thought it was a citizen's petition.
that was the other one, right? Wasn't that the, what was it, Article 10?
That was
11.
that was
Article
11. And that didn't pass, right?
Nope. 10 did not pass.
So this,
Go ahead.
this is the article placed on the warrant, or,
Correct, this is the article placed on the warrant.
right, so,
And that was through the conversation that was at our last select board meeting that was joint with planning board. It was a kind of an agreement with planning board as well as select board that the 3 options were essentially, this language, an option that would then, it was very similar to this, that then would require a ballot vote immediately following. The select board was not in favor of calling a ballot vote because of the significant cost with a ballot vote. Town meeting has a much reduced cost, and KP had also advised that if the ballot was in disagreement, it still couldn't be enforced. There was no legal option to enforce it, it was more of a referendum. And then the third one was kind of the best practice in the sense of what coming out of the current recommendations out of the AG offices is to maintain it at a minimum of 2 or 20%. This is maintaining it, setting it solely at 2. And if 2 becomes less than 20%, then it would need to be revisited through kind of planning board and zoning. Am I correct in that summary?
That's good.
So if it changed, if there was concern from the AG's office within that first month, shouldn't we be concerned that there might be more changes? That maybe we should hold this off to the
Well, so
annual town meeting? I mean,
Sorry.
it seems like it's kind of fluid right now, and to need it revisited quite so soon with the lawyers, I guess I'm concerned that it might happen again, and then we're just going through the motions again and again and again.
Sorry, I just noticed that Alex is on. I don't know what time. Tamika, I don't know if you. Okay. I just wanted, because not everybody can see the screen.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid concern. I think that's also kind of why Roger wanted to just reach out to us to give us options, right? But, and, you know, Roger mentioned this at the joint meeting between the planning and select board is these bylaws as drafted were still approved by the Attorney General's office. They just issued a caution simply due to the fact that obviously the state has their statute with 20%, and on its face, it may seem like it's, you know, conflicting with state law, but they still approved it, right? So ultimately, you know, it's the town's responsibility to comply with state law. The Attorney General's office was okay with it. I think that's their, you know, cautious way of issuing some sort of a warning to cities and towns that, hey, if just FYI, if you do become in violation, the law is not enforceable, and you'll have to address that.
And I think also,
But they were still approved.
So why can't it wait till the spring? To the annual town meeting? Why does it have to go now?
What's the risk if we wait till then?
I mean, I let obviously the board members speak for it, but I think this was also related to an economic development effort that, the individual who submitted the citizens petition, I think, was disappointed that their article wasn't able to be addressed at the special town meeting held in November, and raised, I think, some concerns, that, you know, the folks that were in attendance of town meeting had left before his article was even taking place, so he went to the select board and convinced the board to be able to call a meeting, so I think, you know, our future discussion tonight is gonna talk about revenues, and I think he made an argument that, you know, another business in town that's gonna raise additional revenue is good for the town, and he, I think, would like to have a fair shake at this article being addressed. I think those are all valid comments and questions about, you know, can this be addressed in an annual town meeting or another potential town meeting, but ultimately, obviously, this is the board's discretion to be able to call a special town meeting.
and that
Yes, they
was, and that was some of the conversation with our joint meeting with planning board, was how to, knowing that over the past few years, there's been a lot more citizens petitions that have been zoning related, and how to ensure that that process, and not always going through the planning board, and so how to ensure that that process is followed, and that the legal requirements for zoning bylaw petitions are, citizens petitions are addressed, because I don't know if you recall, but there was no public hearing held for Article 11, which was the citizens petition, which was why we couldn't take any action on it at town meeting.
So this is a change from citizen position to the select board.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And this was in, it was a unanimous vote from the select board to call the special town meeting. I don't wanna speak for everyone, but the consensus was to try to fix that hiccup in the fall, and also knowing where we are looking economically, providing an opportunity for additional, to what Austin said, additional economic development. The petitioner that submitted the petition has property in an area of town that would be zoned properly for it and could really benefit from some positive economic development. And so also, I think the board's thinking also was, if there's a way to potentially rehab, develop a parcel or parcels that could then increase the real estate property value there, as well as the 3% on retail sales, as well as maybe stimulate the local economy in that area of town that could benefit, that is zoned for more economic development, that it might be a larger benefit in the longer term. I think also knowing the process, Karen, I think a little bit to your point about kind of, I think we all know that the state CCC has been in flux. It's still relatively new in Massachusetts. And so I think it's going to be in flux for a while. And so whether we do it now, or if the town decides to vote it down, then that's the town. But if we're gonna say we're gonna wait until it's in order, we're gonna be waiting forever and potentially missing out on revenue, is my personal.
But you keep mentioning the petitioner. There's no guarantee that that petitioner is gonna get this. So it might not rehab that part of town, it might be smack dab in another area. So we gotta get the petitioner out of it. This is whether it's good for the town, period.
Right.
Because the petitioner, it has no bearing. This is you guys bringing it forward.
But also, right, and I understand, but also there's very limited areas in which it can be zoned to go also. And I think we're familiar with the zoning bylaw as it stands, and it was intentionally written that it was zoned in very specific areas. Again, it would have to follow a special permit. There's no guarantee that it's this petitioner or anyone else. Similar to when we had a few years ago when it was Honey Farms and they wanted a liquor license there, and the board at the time said, we're not gonna do that because you're in a plaza with another liquor license, and there were parcel issues and everything there. There are other considerations, for sure. This isn't, and by no means is this a guarantee that there's going to be a second one. It's allowing for the option to have a second, but it's not a guarantee. Austin, I know,
Did the select board take into account the fact that we do have several, I'm sure there's a lot of people that snowbird out of town, and to have it in February does prevent those people from coming to a meeting to vote?
For that, I would argue we held our bylaw town meeting in February.
Uh-huh. Yes, but
There was
I'm,
a decent turnout for that one.
it wasn't
comparatively.
decent is not, I mean, if you can fit in that Blair room, it's not terribly decent.
I think the Blair Room capacity is 90 to 100, and which is about in line. We have the option, I believe, Austin, if there's fire personnel, we can increase the capacity there. It's much easier to do within this building if absolutely necessary, to do satellite rooms, as we had talked about a few years ago at town meeting at Glenwood, when we were worried about capacity of the gymnasium. We got a lot of flack, rightfully so, about the acoustics and the audio at Glenwood in the fall. As you know, that's a concern. That's going to be a concern in the spring, and that's going to be a concern whether it's at Glenwood or whether it's at Naquag. So we are also trying to figure that out as well, and so that was. We're not paying custodians or any coverage at the schools. We have town-owned buildings that should be able to hold people. Again, if every registered voter came in town, that would be a good problem to have, but I don't think that we would be able to fit them in the combination of all of our buildings in town. And this is a real truth in, Holden was saying that they would have to be at the DCU Center, I think, if all of their registered voters showed up. So it's a true problem, but not one, and I'm not trying to be snarky, that we've ever had to have,
I agree.
unfortunately.
But, I mean, I just look at it and go, that's typically months where people are away. And I guess I just look at it and go, shouldn't we be worried about those that do come to meetings on a regular basis?
Yep, and that was some of the consideration, because originally it was proposed for January 30th, where River Watershed is meeting that night also. And we know we have one FinCom member who is a Ware River Watershed attendee, and the other representative is also one that attends town meeting frequently. And we also know that a lot of town residents are very interested and concerned about Ware River Watershed. So that was absolutely a consideration. We also get a lot of flack for having annual town meeting on the Saturday of Mother's Day weekend. And so, again, this is some of that, I think, as town, we're never gonna be able to make everyone happy, unfortunately. And so this was an opportunity to maybe have an option. Again, it was a unanimous vote from the select board. It wasn't an intentional, we're gonna try to sneak this in or whatever. We were trying to get the word out. We're trying to have the conversation about it. There was a lot of pushback also, even in the fall town meeting, that once the municipal studies article was presented, that half the room got up and left. So, again, these are all the considerations that we hear for every meeting, regardless of.
And I understand that. I understand that. I'm just worried about that portion of the population that does leave town for those months. I mean, I know I've heard at select board meetings that we're concerned about making sure that we don't do too much to worry about baseball and soccer and all those things. Well, I think we also need to look at the other side, which is, people who maybe can't have already made plans to depart. I mean, regardless, I mean, I know it was said at the planning board meeting, and I think it was said at your joint meeting. It seems rather underhanded, the way this is being snuck in.
I disagree. As Leah said, there was a process that was not followed. The article did not have an opportunity to be voted on at town meeting. yes, Article 10 got voted on and did not pass, but because of that, Article 11 still could have had an opportunity for the petitioner to get up, speak to his petition, but we could not do any of that because proper process was not followed.
Right.
So to me,
But
this
this
is
isn't the
holding,
citizens petition.
it's still in the same spirit of what we're trying to accomplish. And it's, to me, this is, like Leah said, making this situation right. The town screwed up, so we're doing what we need to do. And if that comes at the expense of having to have a special town meeting, then hopefully that we'll have a checkbox for next time to say everything is done correctly, so we don't have to do this next time.
I have a few questions. Currently, there can only be one establishment in town?
Yes, one retail establishment, and that's what this is speaking to.
If this fails, is that person gonna come back with the citizens petition again, if we heard that at all?
I have not heard anything, I don't know. I don't know if anybody has heard anything.
Is there any chance that they would actually have one of these places opened by regular town meeting?
I don't think that because of all the permitting process, and I think that was part of the rationale, was hoping to have it done in the fall, was because of the permitting process for the town side as well as the Cannabis Control Commission. The way the town bylaw is written, if I understand correctly from my conversation with High Hawk, is that in order to get some of the construction permitting in town, they need a provisional license from the state CCC, so there's parts that need to happen kind of simultaneously and then branch off, and one has to happen before the other.
So they can't go for permitting unless the number is available to them?
Correct.
And why is there an 89B and an 89C?
This, I believe, is referencing I thought it was MGL, but I believe it's our local town bylaw that I believe, Austin, I know you and Roger spoke to it, or planning board John spoke to it. It was just cleaning up language in our existing bylaw that references incorrect.
Yeah, so the way that our zoning bylaws are constructed, even though they're separate bylaws, they sort of are consecutive, and the numbers from the previous bylaw continue onto the next bylaw. So when there was an update at probably the annual town meeting, this was just a scrivener's error that this particular section of this zoning bylaw was not updated to reflect the new number. So this is also just kind of fixing that as well. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't, because it says 5 in one place and a percentage in another. Which one?
So you're not talking about the change for 89C, what you're talking about, there shall be no.
89B.
Well, it says here there can be 5, and it says here there can be 2.
So this is saying that there shall be no more than 5 special permits issued for licensed medical establishments.
Yeah.
Which is total medical, retail, grow,
Yeah.
manufacture, right, those 3, and that total is 5.
Yep.
And of that 5, we're saying that no more than currently 1 can be retail, and this is asking to increase that 1 to 2.
Yeah.
And I believe right now we have 1 retail, we have 1 grow, and 1 grow is in the process, and 1 manufacturer is in the process. So we have 3
So to give you
of our 5.
Just.
It's the word retail, that's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
got it.
So this says, so if this doesn't pass, stays at 1. It stays at 1, gonna reduce our revenue. We allow it to go to 2, we have the possibility of more revenue.
Correct.
And I think that we need the revenue. My opinion.
And if you think, I don't know the numbers, and I didn't even think, I'm sorry, to ask Amy for the numbers for the improvements on the parcel of High Hawk, the current retail establishment, because that was a newly constructed building on an empty parcel. So there's improvement to the property value, just the property value there, as well as the 3% sales tax, revenue tax on the retail sales.
So what do we need to do to move this forward? Do we need to do anything tonight?
So this, I mean, we wanted to have the conversation and ideally make the recommendation. We were hoping the planning board would have had their public hearing and and opened and closed their public hearing and have their recommendation as well on Tuesday night. But as I mentioned, they opened the public hearing, but there were only 3 of the 5 members present, so they continued it to the 28th, as Karen mentioned, and did not make a recommendation.
So can we do anything with this now, as, from the finance committee's perspective, can we recommend approval or not approval?
Yes, we can.
There's no reason that we have to wait.
Okay,
For the fall, we recommended no action until after the hearing, so
well,
because
so-
we voted that right before the town meeting.
and I know that that was the action at the fall meeting, so now we're at a point where we could say that we would recommend and not recommend. So do we need a motion?
And I guess if sorry to interrupt, I mean, if I may, I understand, I think there's 2 issues here. I think people are very frustrated or unhappy with the fact that the select board called a special town meeting. I think the select board is equally frustrated that the original process wasn't followed appropriately. And so I think we're working together to document all of that and try to have a process so that doesn't happen. The second issue is whether or not, regardless of it, is this potentially beneficial to town or not?
Right.
So the special town meeting has been called, we take the heat for that, we've been taking the heat for it, we will continue to take the heat for it. This is the article that we agreed on, this is the conversation.
But
And in the
it's done.
fall, everyone all 3 boards or committees were in favor, had recommended favorable action.
So it's been done, this is it now.
Correct.
And so we need to do something. I'll make a motion that we recommend the town vote favorably for this Article 1 on this warrant.
Second. Alex, second.
So somebody's gotta call the vote, Lynn,
No, Alex is on.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Alex, do you wanna call your roll? Can you see the room? I'm not sure.
Yes, I can see the room, but I mean, we honestly, I kind of missed conversation, so I don't know. We have a second. Is there any additional conversation that's needed? I should probably put that out there because I came in late, so I just want to make sure that I'm covering everything and that everyone's getting a chance to talk about it.
I'm good.
Okay. Do we have to do a roll call since I'm on Zoom, or we do? Or can I just do the roll call?
Yes.
Okay.
He's duels. He's in stereo.
I lost. Hold on.
We can see
I
2
can't
of
see
you.
the room anymore.
Oh, yeah.
No, neither can we. Oh, there we
I'm
are.
gonna shut my video off because it doesn't show me the room if I have my video on for whatever reason. All right, so roll call. Pete,
Mally, aye.
can we just go counterclockwise there?
Just go next.
Ted,
Yeah, let's go.
Purcell, aye.
Winika, aye.
Narwhal, no.
Alex, yes. That's it.
yeah, that's everyone for you guys.
Okay.
Select board, I would entertain a motion.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know, Tamika, maybe you know this, or Austin, the planning board opened the hearing. If something happens and that doesn't get closed, does that impact the ability to vote on this at town meeting, or did they just have to open the hearing?
They have to close it before town meeting.
So
They
if they
technically
don't,
close it in that special time right before town meeting, but it has to be closed.
so if they don't, then we run into potentially the same issue.
Paul, do you have any comments?
I'm just saying this is to allow the motion to move forward to go to the special town meeting.
This is just to make the recommendation if we are saying that this is favorable, that the select board is recommending favorable action, that the town should consider it as a yes vote, or if the town should consider it as a no vote.
Your words are different than mine, but yeah, okay, all right,
So we've already placed the article, we've already called the meeting, so.
yep.
Do either of you wanna make a motion?
I'm torn because I personally, I am in favor of doing this, but I get very hesitant to vote. I mean, is it gonna make a difference? It's already on the warrant.
Right.
I have concerns on voting on something that hasn't gone through the complete planning board process, which is kind of why we got stuck in this situation last time.
Right, and I think, I mean, so I think the point of having the recommendations now is the warrant would be it's not yet posted, correct?
Correct, we have to post by the 23rd.
Right, so we would post it with the recommendations, and that would give people an opportunity to see of the three groups who has voted on it and who is recommending what on it. I think also it could, yes, it should be following that process. I don't know if planning board chooses to not close the hearing, I think that's the chair's ultimately on the chair.
I think Jennifer's point is well taken. In other words, okay, so it's an issue that, okay, we're looking at and trying to make it seem something that is going to actually be a benefit to someone.
I don't want us, we just had a joint discussion with the planning board about proper process and procedure, and I feel like we're already stepping away from that. I mean, part of it was, it didn't necessarily mean that the public hearing had to be closed, it wasn't explicitly stated. Obviously, this was being reviewed by the bylaw subcommittee.
Yeah, so they already technically reviewed it and
Right.
referred it back to the planning board.
Right.
Last week, I guess the one challenge is if they don't have a full board again on the 28th, will they vote to close it? I don't know, but then they would have to close it before town meeting opened, or else we can't move forward.
So am I sensing that you would rather wait to make a recommendation until town meeting, before town meeting?
I just, like I said, I feel like we're trying to make sure the proper process is followed.
And I'm also, I mean, in full disclosure, I'm a little frustrated that they didn't do something. It's not, they knew about it, from our meeting on December 16th. And then we had the joint conversation, so I agree that in the spirit of trying to be collaborative and working together, but I also struggle a little bit with the politics game of it. And I think that it's becoming more of a politics game than looking at what is truly could be or could not be the best interest for town.
Well, I can tell you that it's not politics as to why one of the members wasn't there.
No, and I'm not,
So I just want to make sure that that gets stated out in an open meeting. There wasn't politics involved with one of them. Something came up
no,
and he could not be there.
And I understand that and I respect that, but I think that they have insinuated that we're playing politics, and I
I'm
don't.
just saying, you made a comment. I wanted to make sure that it was said out. I know for sure that
Yeah,
one was not politics.
yeah, that's fine.
So you're through the chair.
Yeah.
To me, it just seems like, I mean, politics is what politics is, and you understand that, but if the select board don't take an action tonight, then I think it's just kicking the can down the road. And I really do have a problem with that.
Well, what happens if you get 50 or 60 people who show up to the meeting. Chances of it happening are very, very small.
Yeah.
However, what happens if there's a big push and they all come and it gets, and so now they've already voted, we've already voted favorably, and it's like we're not listening to the voters.
Well, no, I think that if the 50 show up at what, the town meeting you're saying?
No, to the continued public
To the
hearing.
hearing.
Oh, the public hearing, the
Yeah,
planning
the
board.
public hearing.
And the planning, and they influence the planning board to say, no, don't approve it. Then it doesn't get approved, and we can clear this town meeting.
But I think sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, so from a FinCom standpoint, guys, we constantly talk about the town needing more money in commercial and industrial revenue. And so from whether the 60 people that come to the meeting want it or not, we're recommending that it is favorable for the town to increase the revenue. Whether the town wants it or not is up to the town. We're simply saying as a FinCom that this should be a economically good thing for the town. And that's why I think that it is well within our means to put in favorable action prior to any other meetings, because this is simply for the economical benefit of the town.
And we've done that.
And I think to piggyback on Alex, I feel, I personally feel the same way. We've been charged, we've heard a lot also with the financial stability of town and looking for it. And this isn't again, this isn't a guarantee that if it passes, that it's an absolute going to happen, but it's providing another option for another economic avenue of to come into town.
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity. It's providing a potential opportunity, and that's what we hear again and again and again. And I get a little frustrated because I hear a lot that we want economic development, but we don't want that economic development. We don't want that economic development. We don't want. We don't really want economic development.
And Garen?
And so, I guess I'm looking at it from a select board perspective that from the information that we have, it still has to follow the zoning process, it still has to follow the CCC process, that the economic piece for town is there.
Yep.
Leah, if I may, from a public standpoint, in my humble opinion, given that the select board specifically called this special town meeting, I think for us to post the warrant without the select board's recommendation would probably draw some question as to why that is the case. And I think this case is unique in the fact that we're very well familiar with the article. It's not an article that we're per se looking for the planning board's zoning expertise guidance on through their recommendation. I think this one's a little bit different because of the circumstances.
And I think that's probably what will trigger, I'll make the motion, but just to make the comment, the reason why I would vote tonight and make a motion is because this is the same article from the fall town meeting, which did go through planning board review. They did have the favorable recommendation. And if something changes, then that's, why wasn't that part of the original discussion? Understood. So, but if this was something completely different, it might be a different story. So again, knowing that same article amendments from the previous town meeting, which was favorably voted, I will make a motion to have the select board recommend favorable action for Article 1.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second motion.
Any other conversation? I just also want to comment that I think in the scheme of zoning, it's increasing the option, it's not officially changing the zoning districts or the lines or anything of that nature. So,
It's basically to post a warrant.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion, commentary? Roll call. Paul?
Aye.
Ledger, aye.
Whitman, aye. Favorable recommendation. Thank you. And thank you for the comments, the discussion. We don't have anybody on. Okay. Next on our agenda, I think for both FinCom and Select Board is general fiscal year 26 budget discussion as needed. I am hesitant to go, for select board to go too into depth because we are only a 3-member board and it's on our agenda for Tuesday as well. I'll let Austin and Don, if you have any comments or anything, speak to kind of the projections. But I think one of the considerations that I think Austin is kind of looking for is, are we considering going to consider an override, the big O word, or are we going to consider a substantial and significant cuts? Not into the minutia of that. I was at school committee on Monday night, and they have their budget roundtable, I believe, on the 27th, so there's nothing official there. But the superintendent did mention that a level services budget is in the 4.5% to 5.5% increase to the total budget, and that would be obviously different for the member towns. I believe next week the governor should be releasing her very preliminary budget and kind of priorities, but we don't have any of those numbers or information yet. I'll let Austin and Donna
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Finance Committee for being here. I think everyone knows me. For those in the public who are here that don't know, Donna Kuchar, our Town Accountant and Finance Director as well. So I think the Chair did a pretty good summary of, I think, the position where we are. Obviously, we had a meeting a little while ago where we had a brief discussion about the overall budget situation, where I shared this model. I also shared, I think, an update in September with the group. This model also demonstrated our overall projected position at the annual town meeting. So I think this has been a discussion long in the making, but obviously we're in the midst of the budget process, and I am looking for some direction from both boards for what the thoughts are on just the overall bottom line projections that we have here. As I shared, our net position is with some of the projections that we have, including some of the projected school expenses and the town expenses. Our net position is just, I'm gonna round up and say just about $2.1 million. So there's some considerations there. Candidly, I don't wanna come to both of you respectfully with a budget that isn't in cooperation with, I think, what you're looking for to present to the voters at the annual town meeting. So, and I also respectfully think that $2 million is a big ask for staff to present a balanced budget right now. So I think we need some direction about what you're comfortable with for the process moving forward, so we can move forward through that process. I have obviously presented this model and a draft timeline for a couple of different scenarios, very much a draft timeline. This is based off of kind of backing up from our annual town election and annual town meeting for different situations, obviously subject to change based on your availability and what the committee decides as the vice chairman rolls in for the finance committee. Let me just make sure he has this, someone could pass this down to him. So just, based off of the discussion tonight and some consensus, obviously recognizing that we don't have a full select board here, I think we do have this discussion posted for Tuesday for the board to consider as well and provide some direction to me, but finance committee, as you have, I think, well, not quite a full board here tonight, but just looking for some direction as we move forward through this process, and happy to answer questions you have about the budget situation where we are, and
So
I'll just leave it
Austin,
there.
I think purely from the perspective of looking at the numbers and the trend, we're talking about only $2 million under, something under.
Sorry, I heard you, but
Speak up because,
I think I'm getting old. This is weird. I've never had to say that before.
tell me, you're projecting here that we're going to see a deficit of $2.1 million in '26. But you're really looking at $10 million going out. So I think Leah's point about are we going to go for a override? Are you not saying that with this model, that we're looking at overrides for the next 5 years, every year?
So that's, I think certainly,
That's what I'm saying,
the town
right?
has exactly, and this obviously was published in the budget book and in the annual town meeting warrant, so I think there's a reason why we put it there, just for folks to be mindful of overall financial position, also just from a transparency perspective, where we are.
Right.
Obviously, the most important language on this model is at the top left, it says for planning purposes only, these are very much projections, so on the revenue side and expense side, so this situation could get a little bit better, it could get a little bit worse, depending on where we are from both sides of the house, if you will. So if you just wanna take a high level look, obviously I'm trying to be a little bit conservative with our new growth estimates. $250,000 is probably lower than it should be, but from a conservative perspective, I just am trying to be conservative there. But I don't wanna also push it up too high, right?
Well-
And we're also limited on our state aid. I think it's not a good assumption to assume that the state's gonna give us a lot of money additionally every year, and then by statute, we're not allowed to increase our local receipt projections. So our revenue picture is, it is what it is, right? And this doesn't include any use of free cash or stabilization, anything like that. So trying to be conservative there. And then on the expense side, you're noticing, I think the average increase on the town, I think I put in 3.5% to 4% increase on the town side expenses. And then based off of, I think, the understanding of possibly where the schools are gonna be, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume some big increases over the next few years as well for the schools. So that, everything combined, it does get to your point, I think, of some larger overrides, because even a reasonable percentage on a big number, as the schools grow to a big number, a reasonable percentage is still a big number, right? So that's where our deficit continues to grow a lot more over the years. So to answer your question about overrides every year, that is, I think, as well a policy decision for this committee and the board and ultimately the community to decide how you want to not only fund this year, but make sure that you have a sustainable funding source for your obligations in future years. Something to discuss amongst yourselves and obviously with staff for what would work, and we can model that out, but that's not something for me to decide.
No, I understand that. My particular perspective, being an old guy in a financial analyst in the past, I typically went from what was available in revenues and then had to force back what the expenses were going to be. Now, in a business, it's easy to be able to do because you have control over that. In a municipality like this, it's a lot more difficult because the schools dictate.
Yeah.
And so that makes that hard. On the other hand, I don't know how much, I don't know whether or not we're doing ourselves any favor by being ultra conservative. As we have been in the past, it's what we've always done, been ultra conservative. But I don't know if we're doing ourselves any favors when we do that.
Ultra conservative on the revenue side or on
Well, we're not conservative on the expense side.
right. Well, because so many of our costs are fixed costs that we have no control over. I mean, to your point, the schools, but
Well, so I take issue with we have no control. Because there are things that we can do
right.
that would be very painful. I understand that. But if we look at what our revenues are going to be, and we don't believe that the schools are going to accommodate us at all, we're doing that stuff. We won't like it,
Right.
but we're gonna do it, because we have to balance the budget. So I don't know, I struggle with the conservativeness of the revenues. Can't be what we're gonna spend, and I understand that. It's not reasonable to expect that. But if we can be reasonable about the expenses, then we can start taking a look at, reasonable about the revenue, then we can start taking a look at what we need to do for the expenses, because I just don't see $10 million being a number that the folks sitting outside in that, wherever it is gonna sit back and say, yeah, I'll go for that.
Yeah. So on the revenue
I'm done,
side,
thank you.
and I think they're great points. On the revenue side, we don't have a choice but to be conservative. We are highly regulated, especially on the revenue side. We have to prove to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, especially for, well, mostly everything that you see there, we have to prove to them that we're going to raise those sufficient revenues. On Prop 2.5, on property taxes, we are quote unquote taxing to the max. We are not leaving any excess levy capacity available, right? I think, and new growth, you can get yourself in trouble if you estimate too high and you make financial decisions based upon that, right?
And-
So we also have to be conservative. Now, I think we've had some pretty good years of some development. Our new growth for the fiscal year 25 budget was $500,000. When we were budgeting, it was $400,000 last year, so I think we made out a little bit better than that. But the year before it was $313,000, so it also fluctuates. So, and then on local receipts, unless we can demonstrate, for example, that, we know that, and I don't know what a good example is of, maybe we're gonna get some pilot agreements in 2 years that we know are going to hit our local receipts. I think we can probably make some assumptions and maybe put the DOR, that may also be a stretch, I'll let the accountant do that, but, especially on local receipts, we cannot budget higher than what we received in the preceding fiscal year.
So we've got two questions to answer. One, are we going to tell people, and talking transparency, are we gonna tell them, this is a situation you are looking at, if things are to be, if spending is to run as it has, and we know that there are contractual obligations out there that are gonna put it there, you're gonna be looking for 2.5 overrides for the next 5 years, and maybe beyond that, but at least for the next 5 years.
Or a larger corrective override, similar to what I point to Shrewsbury, similar to what Shrewsbury did. I believe a couple other the Wachusett towns are talking about something similar as well, that it's not going year after year after year for an override.
So what are you talking, what, a number? Not 10? That's the number.
I mean,
Well, that's if everything stays the same, right? I mean,
Well,
10 is conservative.
Well, 10 is a number. I don't know that it's necessarily conservative. I think they've been, I think they're.
We don't know though, Pete.
No, we don't know anything. We're forecasting where we think it's gonna go. And the schools they've got the schools going at where they are. And, okay, so that's gonna be a number that's gonna be.
You know the scary part?
What?
Look down at the town's budget.
Which line?
Well,
The expenses?
yeah, it's 11
Yeah.
municipal operations. We're gonna wipe it out in 4 years if we don't get an override.
Well, yeah, of course. But that's the point. We have to tell people that this is what's gonna happen. This is, I think that's a part of our responsibility, I think this model that Austin put together is perfect. It's really good. It gives people, it's gonna start the conversation. What is it that we wanna be at? If we wanna be able to be at, level of police, level of fire, level of town
Whatever.
support, et cetera, then this is what we're gonna have to do. To Lee's point, let's go 10.
Well,
This operating budget is based upon level funding with only contractual increases.
Those were the instructions, yes.
Right, so,
going
what
forward?
it is it's level funding only
Right.
with contractual, so in all actuality,
Services come down.
services are going down.
Right. So is that the content of the expenses here, that it is level
they hit
services?
us with a new school.
Yeah, so that the town operating budget, those are inclusive of the departmental requests that were submitted for FY '26.
departmental, so you didn't answer the question. Is this level
Sorry, I gave you a
services?
good answer.
Yeah, you did. It
Level
was a perfect
funding.
answer.
Not level service,
Yeah,
level
you wanna
funding.
run for mayor of someplace in Gardner maybe,
We're in Worcester now.
yeah, I understand that. But the point here is that
Council.
this is,
Yeah.
this is a level services forecast, right?
Yeah, well, it's not fair to say it's level funding either, cause obviously it went up over that last year,
Yes,
right?
but only with contractual, it's level
Yeah, contractual
funding,
and or like fixed cost obligations, things like that, that don't.
but not level services.
So would Darren is the dumbest guy in the room, would an override, if we said $10 million, would that $10 million hit everybody's taxes this year, or can you stagger it over years?
So if you increase the levy by $10 million, I do believe it's,
It only hits for whatever we would appropriate for, so.
But, so we couldn't lessen the burden by going, we said 10, but could we don't need all 10.
You don't have to tax to 10.
We could take 2 and 2 and 2 and 2,
Take it as we need it.
take it as we need it.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you would still, my tax bill would show a 10.
No, your tax bill would only show whatever we use.
It's what's been appropriated. It's what.
So if we appropriate 2, then it's 2, if we appropriate 4, then you're gonna show 4, that kind of thing.
So we would vote, it would be a
It's the
10%
opportunity.
override, but, okay, we only need 2%, we're only gonna tax to the 2%.
So it's like it would be $10 million, so it's the opportunity to raise the levy to the point where we need it, and in 2026, it's gonna be another $2 million.
All right, so then if we're using that theory, and I hate spending people's money, why wouldn't we go, I'm just gonna throw a number out there, $20 million and not use it if we don't need to?
so,
No, but
Because
why?
that'll never pass.
so we do have some limitations, so, your, I can't remember, it's like levy ceiling is 2.5% of your overall value, so our overall property value is $1.4 billion, which is a lot of money. So that means that we have approximately, I'm gonna round up and say $15 million in override capacity. So we can only, for example,
Go
our max
10.
override we can do is 15 million.
So you hear what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I mean, we're
Because
gonna.
you know what, who's gonna stand up and say 10's got us for 5 years?
Well, so here's the problem. We did that last year.
That's where I'm going with this.
And I came back this year and I was embarrassed by the fact that we said it's gonna cover and it didn't. How do we know that 10 million won't cover in 5 years? That maybe it is 15 that we have to be able to do.
Well, I would argue with the 2, there was still a decent amount of one-time revenue that was in the budget that was as a funding source. And while the school was supportive of it, we didn't include them and really try to get a projection as to what their anticipation of needs is over the next 1 to 3 years. I think and we've already started that conversation with the schools, what their anticipation is over the next ideally 5 years, and getting some sort of commitment. And I loop back to the Shrewsbury thing, but they did, I think it was a $8 million override, I forget, I have it on but over the course, and their commitment was, and they have a town-run school, it's not regional, but their commitment was over 5 years, a minimum of 5 years, and because investments did really well, they ended up utilizing and making a lot of money in some of that. So that's not a guarantee, but if we had that excess levy capacity, not to go all the way up to the max, but there's some excess there. And I believe when we did the $2 million override, Austin, if you correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was only about $500,000 levy capacity with that.
But so, I agree with you 100%, but the $2 million was gone in under a year.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
And so.
So credibility is what you're saying.
The bottom line is we lost it.
Yeah.
Reality is it's gone.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is, we're proposing, well, we're not saying it's gonna happen, but the model is saying that it's going to be $10 million override at time.
If we're gonna, and what would, so, I don't even wanna ask this question, do you know how much $10 million would affect everybody's taxes?
Just 1 second, I can get you that.
And as he's looking at that, the question is going to be, to your point before, we came into the room over here and some other places, and we said, you know, we need to do it, this is what we need to do, $2 million, come on, folks. And they said, okay, it's a cup of coffee. If you break it down, it's a daily cup of coffee, overall. And it's gonna be there, and it's gonna carry us a period of time. What we're saying here is gonna be $10 million. Trust us that it's gonna be there. And now the question that I think the electorate is going to be asking us is, you weren't very trustful the last time you said, and it didn't happen.
Well, I'm gonna argue that point with anybody that wants to throw it out there. We were given the best information at the time, and we made our decisions and went to those meetings.
Yep.
Because we thought we didn't do it in any, the wrong word is malice, but malice, right? We did everything that we thought was right, but.
No, you're right.
I think, just to chime in, saying that the money's gone is not the right way to put it. It's simply that we're spending more than that $2 million of an increase that we did the override for. So it's not like we lost money. We're just spending more than the override. And part of that problem is going to be inflationary, right? So like one of the things that we didn't take into account was how much inflation was. And that played a pretty large role in how quickly that money went. There's no doubt about that. There's nothing we can do about that. We can't control that.
A lot of it was the state funding, and we can't control that either.
And we're not
That
getting,
needs to be
that's not getting any better.
No.
No, but the point is, the point that we have to deal with is that we're making a projection here. Austin is making and the town government is making a projection for where, in their opinion, the expenses are gonna go. And that's all it is. It's just a wild ass guess that says this is where we think the number's going to be, and it will do that or not.
Educated wild ass guess.
But, well, everything is. But we need to be able to provide something for the town so that they can make some educated guesses or approvals
decisions.
based upon what we tell them we think is gonna happen. You know, it's as simple as that. Now, we could be real cynical here, and we can say, well, we don't think any of the towns are gonna approve the town budgets. So let's put it in at last year's numbers. That'll help us. May not be a smart thing to do, but we could do that. It's a projection. And then if we need to, we're gonna have to be real clear as to what it is that we would have to do to be able to get to that number if we're not gonna go with an override.
So what's the tax rate now? 14.23. And where do you,
I don't remember.
It's around there.
okay, so where do you think it's gonna go?
Tax rate
Yeah,
with,
all this.
well, if you do 10,
Yeah,
$20. The current tax rate is 14.24.
May I ask a question through the chair? Going back to the school budget, you indicated that theirs is a level service budget.
No, so that level service, he's referring to the current budget that we were given
Yep.
from the from Wachusett School District. The number he has in here is not level service.
No, so Alex, so I took that 127 million that we were given at the meeting that you attended, which was their level services, quote unquote, with assumptions, I think is what they said. So basically contractual increases, things like that. And that's how I got the number that's in the model.
Yeah, but then you have a 10% increase. That level service was like 4.5%.
That's on their budget, right? But our assessment ends up being, just, I'm gonna round up and say 10, it's around 8 for this year, but, and that's because of our enrollment, and I calculated that figure based off of since FY17, our historical average has been about 12.8% of the total WRSD budget. I went a little bit higher, up to 14%, just to be conservative. And that's where I got to the number that's in the model for WRSD.
That includes the following years too, then?
Yes.
So where my question with that goes is, so level service, does that mean just contractual obligations? Because that, to me, when we say level service, that just means you've got what you need now, you maintain that level of service, X number of teachers, X number of programs. So, is there any discussion about pushing back on the schools to, what about level funding something? Like, why is it the town, like, I understand, like, none of this is good talk. Do we wanna take away teachers from kids? No. Do we wanna take away programs from kids? No. But why is it the town operations that are always suffering? Why is the school not
Feeling the pain?
feeling some of that as well? And whether that means that gets kicked back to the state to help
Yeah.
kick in more funds, but why is it always the town? Why is there no more pushback collectively from all the district towns
That's something for the legislature.
to push back on them and say, you need to make some cuts. We can't absorb all of them because you're bankrupting us.
We brought that up when we had when we met with the school committee. And I said, so even you're doing level service, we're doing level funding.
Right.
So already we're behind.
Behind,
Already, and we're just gonna fall more and more and more.
right.
And
So the scary thing, Jen, and after looking at some of the stuff that came out, if every year, say this doesn't pass. We take 2 million this year, or whatever, let's say 2 million for the next 5 years. The town that we know the government is gone.
Right,
Yeah.
Police, fire,
yeah,
DPW,
Right.
all the good people in these buildings up here. We're gonna have $2 million. We're not gonna barely turn on the lights.
Right.
So I don't know what we're gonna do, but
And I think part of it, also the consideration is, I mean, you explain all this and show this to the majority of the people in town, they're gonna get it. It's inflation, I understand, things are increasing, costs go up. I don't have the money to pay for it.
Yeah.
You're talking to me about whether or not I can put food on my table, whether I can pay my mortgage. I don't have the increased salary to cover what you're asking of me.
roughly 6%.
So,
A $6 increase on people's taxes per thousand. No way. It'll be horrible.
you're right, it
so
won't work.
they could understand till they're blue in the face, but
Yeah.
they still could just say,
They
no,
can't
I
do it.
can't.
If you had $6 for every 1,000 on your tax bill, oh my Lanta.
So
Well, for a $400,000 house, it's $2,500 a year.
the answer.
Is that the total thing, or is that
it's only
It's just $2,500.
It's just $2,500, what's the big
It's a
deal?
cup of
That's a lot
coffee.
of money.
Or two.
is that, Alex, goes up 2,500 every year, or is that over the course of, it's gonna be right from
That
the?
would be at 20. That'd be at 20%. So if you did 20, if you went from $20 per thousand. So if you went from 14 to 20 at year one, to be a $2,500 increase. So if you did $1.50 every year, which I think is what roughly, it's $1.30 roughly every year, right? That would have to go up, something like that, whatever the number is. So you're talking, it'd be like $800 a year each year until you reach 2,500. So 2,500 would be 2030.
And that's without, that's if we don't have to borrow any money for a new school.
But I'm looking at
Right,
numbers here, it's
right.
two
So the-
million.
And they're telling us that's coming. Is it within this 5-year period?
This is a easy question, I think, that gets asked to the electorate.
This bottom
What do you
number
wanna
isn't
do?
cumulative, is
Do you
it?
wanna maintain your town government and the services that you get? Or are you more concerned about paying a standard, a current bill, whatever it is, and only pay for schools? Cause if that's what this is going, if that's the result here, we gotta ask the question. I think Jen's right, they'll understand. But will they be able to afford it?
Well, okay, I'm not gonna speak for the last couple things we did here, but we tried to fund something that was, or vote in a policy that could have helped us, and that went down like the Titanic last.
Well, no, that didn't technically help us. You're talking about the
CPA, yeah.
The CPA would have helped us in other ways that would have eventually lowered this.
It could have, yeah. But
possibly.
to your point, that was potentially $100 a year fee
Yeah.
that, like you said, went down in flames.
Right.
So, and that's $100, and we're talking 2,500. Like,
Right.
this is,
So again, we come down to the question to the electorate. Do you wanna you wanna provide your services, keep the town government going? Or do you wanna just pay the same amount of money?
Well, I think it also comes down to the selectmen have to step up and give guidance to Austin on how he should proceed. Austin's looking to say, are we going for an override? Or are we not? What are we gonna do? I think we almost have to go for an override, but how much are we going for? And if we don't do it, I think we gotta somehow project over the next 5 years what it's gonna look like.
Right.
But I don't know, even if it doesn't pass, it's gonna be bad. You know what I'm saying? So,
Absolutely. But I think we have to say that. I think that has to be said somewhere. The override is gonna keep the government going the way it is, or no override is going to shut us down
over 5 years.
over 5 or 6 years. And
It's not gonna be 5 years. If you do $10 million, it's not going to be 5 years.
Okay.
$10 million is gonna get us to basically 3 years.
Okay,
If
So
you add
now-
up these numbers by just basic math.
right.
Well, so we could do it live right now, just so you can see, right? So everyone has their models with their net positions, right? So let's add 10 million to the levy. How many zeros is that? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Good.
So there's your new, so obviously this is leftover, right? So out to 2030, you still have sufficient revenue for,
We still have about $1 million levy capacity.
because, right, 10 million
Based on
then
projections.
adds to your levy base, and then you're adding 2.5% of that and
That's a
additional.
very
growth.
conservative school budget.
Austin, increase it by the maximum, 15 million. What happens?
And it is 5 years, Karen, because it would be 26, 27, 28, this
I would love,
forecast is.
I would hope that Austin is 100% right with the school budget. He's playing conservative, and I understand that. For financial, that's exactly what we do.
I will,
But I do not believe that that's what we're gonna get.
So do you want me to plug, for the purpose of tonight, do you want me to plug in some numbers?
I don't have any idea what a wild ass
Pick a number.
guess that we might potentially
I
get.
will
I don't
say-
have any idea.
I will say this school administration is much different than the
Definitely.
previous and is
Without a doubt.
advocating hard at the state level and asking the towns, and not only the 5 Wachusett towns, but also there's a project 211, I believe, of the 211 communities that are in held harmless this year, likely to be held harmless again, trying to really rally those 211 communities
I agree.
to
But legislature moves slow.
right, no,
Yeah, that doesn't affect anything we're talking about tonight, frankly.
It's, what I'm saying is that by 2029, 2030, if things have changed, like, there's a lot of ifs there, right?
Sure.
But there's a potential that there can be some movement on the state side to improve either the funding formula, which really is what is needed, or the local state aid. But that's, again, not a guarantee, but I will say that
I have nothing but nice things to say about the current school. I've
I have nothing
been,
but nice things to say about the current school committee, but they came in this year, they're gonna wreck us again.
Well,
right,
the truth is even worse. They don't know what they're gonna do.
right. That's
So-
what I'm saying,
so-
it's very conservative.
Yeah, I think Karen's right. This is a conservative budget, but they could come in and do a much higher number. Now, I think that if we're looking at this, right, they're going up by nearly $10 million over a 5-year period. I have a hard time believing that any town is going to accept that as well. So I have a feeling that this is not going to pass from an education standpoint, but I do think that we have to be prepared to deal with it. But I also think that, you know, that's a large increase, but like, what sort of community do we want to be as well? Like, we want to be a high level education town. I don't think there's anyone who would argue that. So we do need to fund the schools appropriately, but that also doesn't mean that, to Jen's point, we can't go back and say, yeah, we're willing to play ball and help you guys get to a place where, you know, this is a community that people want their kids to go to school, but we also need to live in the real world. So I think that there's a level of acceptance that the budget's going to go up, but also there needs to be a happy medium here, and we need to figure that out with the school included in that conversation.
What's the new school cost us in town? $100 million? A little more, 112, 115?
Depends on what you put in it.
Yeah, all right, so let's, you know, but I mean, that's gonna,
And building costs are only gonna go up now because of everything that's happening in the
so,
world, so.
I mean,
And we keep talking about how we have debt capacity now, we should be filling that, but can we afford to fill that with debt?
well, if you give them a $10 million override, and then on years, whatever, you're gonna get them again, hard.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're asking for, again, theoretically, a $10 million override just to operate the town. That doesn't mean any sort of other capital improvements, new school, anything.
So, from
Fixing
the
of any of the
perspective of the town, the concept of the town, the philosophy of the town, it's agricultural committee, agricultural town, very conservative. We're forcing people in town that can't afford this increase to sell their property to people who can afford it. And it's gonna change the character of the town entirely.
It already is.
It
It
already
already
is.
is, but this is gonna make it worse. Just as long as we
So
know.
I think one of the things that I actually asked Austin about, because I wasn't sure on the rules on this, I asked him earlier today what sort of exemptions we could add or how we could modify the exemptions that are currently in place. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Austin, but we could increase the exemption or the exemption amounts for people who are on, you know, fixed incomes, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there is a path to an override where we could add that capability for people who are on fixed incomes or do not have the money to, you know, I don't know what that number is, and I don't know what the best path there is.
But that puts the burden on the people that aren't.
It does, yes, but I mean, I hate to say it, but the people on the fixed incomes, generally speaking, are not the ones who are sending their kids to the schools that's
Well,
costing us $10 million
That's true.
more.
And we're not gonna, and those folks, those people on fixed incomes are not going to be able to adjust or
So let's
change.
As soon as you go that other way,
Yeah.
as soon as you go down this path, Darren is a tax-paying, still working, dear Lord, hopefully not that many more years, is gonna pay more.
Yeah. So,
And Jen's gonna pay more, you're gonna pay more, we're all, if it's 10 million, we gotta make it up some way. So if we wanna go down the road of giving more exemptions, which I think we should do, it's not gonna be 2,500, it's gonna be 3,000 or 3,500.
but it won't be that, Darren. I don't think the exemptions would be that. The exemptions typically are $75, $100, $200. I don't see the exemptions being that significant.
Darren, some of the consideration is kind of what you guys had just said, was that I think Alex said it, are the ones, and this is a broad brush, right? But the fixed income folks that legitimately can't afford the increase are most likely not the ones utilizing the schools. And there's often talk about, can't we essentially find a way to tax the parents more, or the homes with kids more, because they're using the schools, and that's 60% of our budget. And
You're gonna have to make a case of it being something
Yeah, but
other than real estate.
but
You can't tax the people who get kids going to school, or wealthy people.
You can't do it.
A higher real estate tax.
no, right, you can't, but essentially what with the exemptions, the increase in exemptions, that's essentially what is happening in some ways, is the people that can afford it are paying it, where there's opportunities for those who legitimately cannot afford it, not want to afford it, but
Right.
legitimately can't afford it.
Right,
What percentage of our town is over 65? Or is it, would that be?
5%.
say that again, Darren,
No,
I'm
I
sorry.
think it's,
I'm old
What
like Ron.
percentages of our town are old like you just said?
It was like 25%.
Yeah.
That's what I-
25%?
Several times.
Yeah, so here's
So
the
that
point.
25% is whatever we do is coming back to, it, maybe not that much.
But
So, but even
it's not
still-
only just that, it's also young families just starting out, and and I don't know about anybody here, but if I go to my boss and say, in order for me to stay in my home, I need a 7.7% increase every single year, he's gonna say, see ya, pack up your crap and go. I mean, but so that means every year my taxes are going up.
Yep.
And my income is, gonna decrease because I'm funding Rutland.
I come from a company that does not give you cost of living increases. My raises come based on profit for the company, so that could be up here,
Yeah.
it could be way down here, it could be nothing.
I come
So,
from a company for the
it's-
last 30 years. I got a Christmas bonus and a Christmas card, and it was, come on, you know what they did this year?
Card.
Here's another service call, see you later.
But to Karen's
Because
point,
everybody is tight right now.
yeah,
I'm
well,
not.
exactly, to Karen's point, it's not just the seniors that
There's
are
no
on fixed
extra.
incomes, it's people,
Everybody.
it's everybody.
everybody.
That just, their salaries are not increasing with inflation, and they don't have,
So,
just because they don't have those exemption options, they still don't necessarily have the extra funds to afford.
so are we
I
saying?
mean, I want to still be able to take a vacation. I don't want to work all this time
Oh, come on, Karen.
just to pay my taxes. 'Cause that will not be something that I care to do.
So are we,
sorry,
are we?
Austin just pulled up to circle back, there, he has age cohort data up on the screen. For 2023, the under 20 population is 29.20%. 20 to 45 is 45.70%. 55 to 64 is 12.20%, and 65 plus is 12.90%.
So 25%, like we were saying.
And this is
We
Rutland?
said 65 and over.
You said 65 and over.
So, yeah, 55 and over is about 25.
Well, you can take the,
But-
you can
but
take the
Council on
under
Aging is
20
60
ones,
and
they're not
over,
paying
isn't
any.
it? Council on Aging is 60 and over, that's what.
So the under 20 ones aren't paying anyone, so it's more than worse, you know what I'm saying?
So let's look at it from the perspective of what we think we need to be able to do. We've got a
Heck up and
A
leave in
10
the dark at night, leave the
$10
keys on the
million
steps.
increase, override that we might wanna be presenting. We may want to be looking at trying to force back some information down to the schools. Or we may be looking to change the philosophy of our taxes within town.
You can't, by state law.
I don't know, I mean, we're just talking about, kids going, parents paying more.
I don't think there's an avenue for that. Other states, I think, have avenues for that.
So if that's not available,
Right.
then we're back down to the two.
Yep.
We've got an override, cut the budget, one or the other, pick one.
Well, I had already mentioned to Austin earlier today, I mean, like you said, Pete, we're looking at overrides every single year here.
Yeah.
If we do this. I'm not in favor of constantly asking for overrides. If we're gonna do something, we need to make a plan and we need to present that to say, this is what we're trying to do and accomplish, just to keep things running. We understand, this is a hard pill to swallow, but this is something that we need to do, or unless you wanna keep going back and revisiting this every year. Maybe that's what the town wants to do.
Maybe
Maybe
that's
they
what the
want to
town
do
wants.
it one year at a time.
They wanna
And-
hear us come in, or they wanna hear people,
Exactly
their
what it needs to go
representatives
to.
Or have
come
1
in
year
and
of-
explain to them what's going on.
And I think we really, somewhere along the line here, we gotta get firmer on, is it 10, is it 15, or is it 20, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
we
not,
don't do
I'm
it.
not, you know.
How close are we
I-
to getting 5-year projections from the school?
So,
That's
I
3 years out?
I don't wanna speak for the superintendent in advance of his meeting with the school committee on the 27th, but I suspect that we'll have a better idea of the future fiscal years based off of what his request will be to the school committee.
On the 27th?
So I asked the question, this does not include anything extra. big fire trucks.
No,
No.
no.
Doesn't include, that are $1 million now. Public safety building, a dispatch center, a council on aging, a new school, fix a road here and there. We get some chapter 90 money, but we also contribute to that, so.
Just operating.
No, you're right.
And it's.
And then
A lot of that-
if we do that, anything else other than this, for the next 5 years, they're getting hit with more.
Another override.
That brings me back to the topic I brought up last week, and I know we've talked about this before, but we really need to start investigating regionalization of services as well. Because a lot of what you just brought up, like a big fire truck, can we get one big fire truck that's shared by 3 towns that, is in a central location that only gets used once? I mean, we need to be looking at those more closely than we do now in a way to save money going forward. I mean, I think that's something that we're proving right now, that we need to look for ways to improve those capabilities.
Alex,
to
you
lessen
stole
the
my
burden.
thunder. I was gonna bring that up at our Tuesday meeting.
North,
Well, I brought it up like 2 weeks ago, so I stole your time. No, I mean it's one of those things that I think is
Yeah.
so ingrained in our 5-town school system already that it baffles me that we don't. And I know we do it with some things, animal control, and there's some other things I know that we do it with, but I think that there's far more teamwork that can be done, and I'm assuming that, and I would almost guarantee, like somebody like Paxton who had a failed override last year, that they would be more than willing to have that conversation going forward. So I have to imagine that everyone is in the same place as us.
unfortunately, old school New England is very parochial about fire departments, police departments,
True.
and highway departments. If we can break that, I don't disagree with you, Alex, but
Well-
that is gonna be a big nut to crack, number one. And what I was gonna say is North Middlesex Regional District, up there, a little smaller than us, they're closing 2 schools. They're moving kids, shifting kids around because they can't support all their schools. And I think there's 7 schools, I could be wrong. But I
So-
think it was 7. So 2 of them are gonna close.
Right.
Now, what towns are those?
Pepperell,
Townsend?
Townsend, they're up there. There's a few school way up there. We could, maybe Austin knows someone up there, we could reach out and kind of figure out what they did, but it's an interesting concept.
I think
But we-
Quabbin did that a few years ago. I
They
think,
close okay, right?
So
They closed
there's
in
gotta
Hardwick?
there's gotta be an impetus to have that conversation.
Yeah, but right now, you couldn't close our schools.
Right.
Right, where are we gonna get the kid? Maybe Princeton doesn't.
But even if we can't do something with schools, and yes, I agree, in taking a look at ways we can regionalize would be a benefit, but there's gotta be other ways in town to consolidate and,
Right. And-
not cut costs, but figure out a way to combine
We
things
can't
that-
This thing here is gonna be the thing that drives that. Like you said before, 5 years down the road, we're out of business.
Well,
We're out
we
of
can't, we
business.
can't get everybody to agree on a single hauler for trash. Never mind, fire trucks,
Yeah,
police cars,
yeah. But I'm saying,
DPW trucks. If you think you,
But do you remember the town meeting when we were voting in the 24-hour care for the ambulance? All I remember is the story that at one night, somebody had a child with a bad asthma attack and they had to wait for the Holden ambulance to come. And they actually chose to drive the child to the hospital because they didn't even see the ambulance pulling out until they had passed it. No disrespect, if my house is on fire, I don't wanna wait an extra 10 minutes for that fire truck. I get it, I understand, and I understand financially, but when it's your loved one or it's your home that's on fire, you don't wanna wait the extra 10, 15 minutes.
so if we're,
Especially if it's in bad weather,
Right.
it could be even more than that.
so if we're really inclined to look at regionalization, again, I think the projection here will do it, will encourage the conversation. Because, as I said, 5 years out, we shut down shop.
well, we'll get regionalization for the police because there won't be any, so the state police will come. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's gonna, unfortunately, that's the route it'll go.
Right, but the same thing with.
Do I want that? No.
With everything else, that's the conversation. Again, what we're trying to say here, 2.5 override, $10 million over 5 years. Cut services entirely until they entirely go away. Or we regionalize in some form or fashion that gets us to a point where the budget is affordable.
And I just don't know that.
But this
we're-
projection,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm sorry.
Is you're going the
But
same
this
place.
projection is based upon level funding for
Right.
town services.
Right.
So that means services are going down
Right,
and taxes are going up.
but if we regionalize, services might be able to stay the same.
Maybe.
I'm just saying, we don't know.
Maybe. Talk to
It'd be-
people who have been in some regionalizations and you might hear some different things. I've heard some different
I think
things.
it becomes a matter of the governing body, being the select board, to be able to say, let's put together a group of people that will go ahead and start looking at it. Not just from Rutland, because Rutland would say, yeah, I don't know. But let's talk about maybe the 5 towns in the school district. Take that model and expand it to all services. And what does it look like? How does it work? To the point that we would have maybe a station at a point where the towns connect, fire station, police station, emergency services, and people go out from there. It's a conversation. I feel damned if I do and damned if I don't.
Yeah.
Damned if I don't get that $10 million. Damned if I do have to cut the services.
Well, and the unfortunate thing, Karen keeps hammering home on this, is we don't know if $10 million is the right number.
No, I understand that. Pick a number, $48 million.
Right.
Who knows?
We
Whatever the
just
number
can't
is.
attach a timeline for how long it's gonna last, because we don't wanna.
Because we don't know.
We have no idea.
We
There's
have
too
no
many
idea,
unknowns.
and there's too many unknowns, and truthfully, there's, maybe we'll get some good projections from the schools, that might help. But right now, with this projection, we're not gonna be able to make snow and ice and all those, so there's gonna be all of those things that are gonna be overspent.
Yeah.
I mean,
Which makes me wonder if we should, if again, we're considering an override, do we need a more targeted number? And do we need to start going fiscal year to fiscal year to say, this is what we're looking at, we have
Here's
more
why.
solid numbers,
And
this
here's
is
why.
why. This is what
Well,
we're
we
asking
need
for.
to get the input from the school very directly, I think is where my head's at, before we even broach this conversation past this table, right? Without substance and how much the school is going to, what their 5-year plan is, asking the town for $10 million is a moot point.
So,
But then what do we get for
Is there
Austin
an
at this
opportunity
point?
to do the Shrewsbury style thing where they
Sounds
invest?
like nothing.
so we're coming up on 8:00, and I just wanna be mindful of, like, because we don't have a full select board here, but I wanted to have the conversation, I think Jen had asked for it also, Alex, I think, had asked for it as well, to get a sense. Austin is hoping, I believe, I don't wanna speak for you, but you're hoping to get a sense, are we likely going to be looking towards an override? What that dollar amount is, we're undecided yet, we understand that. Or are we directing Austin to say, look to cut $2.5 million of this budget?
Well, so, I mean, really, we're looking for the 2.5 override because it's our, I think, collectively, it's our opinion to keep the services the way they are. Keep services at least level to where they are.
Unfortunately.
level funding, not level services.
I'm saying our.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep hitting that home because it means decreased services.
Right,
But
but
I think-
I'm saying that the $2 million that we're shy here is too light. We should be asking for whatever the level services are, because I think that's what we're
I'm just
looking
gonna
for.
say, can we get one of these with a level service
Right.
projection
Right,
versus level funded?
and then that's
you're
where
not
we
gonna
go,
like it.
we go with the level services.
It's not gonna get any better.
So just one,
No,
I just
of course it's not gonna get, it's gonna get worse.
But to Karen's point, that changes the bottom line numbers of
Right.
what,
Significantly.
right.
So basically, so what that's gonna mean is we're gonna go back to departments and say, all right, you can increase your supplies and services to match it, essentially what the costs are gonna be. This does not reflect any staff decreases, so we're not decreasing services from the level of staff that are providing the services. Basically what this means, to your point, Karen, that you mentioned, is maybe at the end of the year, we don't have as much money to cover a snow and ice deficit or health insurance, things like that, right? So.
Not as much overtime, all of those kinds of
Yep.
things.
Yep.
It all
But this
means-
does not include staff cuts. I just wanna be, so.
No staff cuts, but
But I also wanna add that this does not use any free cash or any other funding it doesn't use any one-time revenues in this model, correct,
one-time
Austin?
funds.
One-time
Because
one-time
we
funds.
don't have any, right?
Well,
And we don't want to do that
normally,
normally, right?
no, we don't, but what I'm saying is, I think historically, we've put a minimum of $100,000, which in the scheme of 10 million is nothing, but a minimum of $100,000 in to balance the budget of free cash, and oftentimes then we go to fall town meeting and put more money in, or into the annual, it ends up coming up with more. I think we've gone as high as, I think we were at almost 400,000 a couple times through
Yes, we were,
COVID
yeah.
between ARPA and everything. So I just wanna be clear that there's the potential that, to Darren, to some of your points, we would have more free cash for some, not big, huge building expenses, but there could be some free cash available to do maintenance or seed money or whatever, but also we're not assuming that money is there automatically either in our.
I'm just looking at it as, just the basic things that happen. We damaged a set of tires on that's not in the budget, so now that's gotta come out of something. In the end,
Right.
it all does make a difference.
Go ahead.
So Austin asked for guidance. When I looked at this the other day, and when I look at it again now, he's already made a decision.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So you've already made a
My brain just
decision.
woke up.
I'm thinking that one thing we ought to do is say, this is a good idea or it's a bad idea, but I also just heard someone say, well, why don't you add a third timeline that is level services?
The interesting thing is, in Darren's opinion, and it's just Darren, I don't think we have much say in it. I think this kind of falls on the selectmen to make a decision. Now, we help them guide them and we can do this, but unfortunately, they got the big broad shoulders that they're gonna have to step up to the plate and either swing or pass or get hit. I can't guide them with that. I can say, I think we should do this, or what you just said can do this, but that's where we're gonna have to step up to the plate, selectmen, and say,
He's given us one idea, or them, or whoever, here's one idea, either say that's a good idea, or reject it, or give them a new idea.
Your override budget timeline pretty much, I think, is right? So, I mean, to be able to have, I think, to meet the town budget request and the school budget request, you need additional resources, right? So that is kind of that override budget timeline. And just one thing, and I'm sorry, I failed to mention this earlier, thankfully Donna's here. Just because if we did an override question for $10 million, right, that increases our levy capacity. That doesn't mean that we actually have to levy it. Right, so that doesn't mean.
that's what we said earlier, right?
So, and I'm sorry, it didn't click earlier.
That's where I was going with that
When we asked
question.
that, right,
I
so.
don't know that that's gonna make a difference to your rate. They hear 10 million and they're not gonna care that they may not get charged 10 million right out of the bat. They're just.
I understand, but I think,
That's a piece of the education piece.
and that's the education, right, to talk about what the town meeting does for the 5-year outlook, right? But the actual impact, for example, if it's just, the 2 million deficit that you see here is, the new tax rate is $15.51, so it's an increase of additional $1.27.
That's where I
to
was
the
going with.
And I apologize, that didn't click. Now, obviously, if the town did decide to be creative and still levy all of that, but put it into an override stabilization, whatever you decide to do, that is an option, but if you didn't need it, the point is you're just increasing your levy limit
As needed.
as needed, yeah.
Could we get some information about the Shrewsbury model that you speak of?
Yeah.
That we can kind of mull it around? I don't know.
So I get what you're saying, Darren, but I can't imagine that anyone in town would be willing to do that quick of an increase in their nobody. If we were to go and say we're going to increase your tax bill by $2,500 next year, they'd all shoot us. we cannot do what Shrewsbury did, an increase like that. I do not think that that's even remotely sellable. If we were to say that you're gonna have a $600 to $800 increase each year for the next 5 years, that is far more.
The school is a town department in Shrewsbury.
That's a major difference.
That is a huge difference. They bought in, they said they'd be there, we don't have that.
No.
We don't see them getting in the boat with us moving forward. It's better, yes, they're more transparent, yes. However, in Shrewsbury, that
It's a big.
was a very big difference, is the school said, we will live within this, we will do this, we will do that, and we don't have that. I talked for a long time with the gentleman I work with who lives in Shrewsbury, and I said, okay, explain this to me.
Yeah, but we could get this. I think that in partnership we could get the school to agree to live within a certain means. If all 5 towns went to some point and said, "Here's the plan," and the school said, "Yes, we're good with that." But that also, to me, if we do that and we get the school to present that with us, if this goes to shit and the school takes it all, then the townspeople will look at it and it's not, all like, oh, you guys screwed up, you guys didn't know what you're talking about. It becomes, it's our fault and the school's fault, and it's. I think we need to be more in partner with the schools if we do this, and that's why I said that in order to bring this anywhere outside of this table, we really need to have the school's 5-year plan, at least a rough draft, to show what that $10 million is going to buy. Without that, I think we have no chance.
We have been, in the past, I don't know how many years ago, they did exactly what you said. We had a little extra and they took it. And they do that occasionally from time to time. So it's very difficult. I don't know. This is
We
not,
can only do what we can do, right? I mean, like, we got to do something.
oh, no, we gotta do something, but the nice thing is we gotta work with the selectmen so they can make a decision.
Well, I mean, so from the worst case scenario is that all 5 towns say, or 2 or more of the 5 towns say, nope, we're not gonna agree with that budget. And they're back to a 1/12 budget, which is the last year carried forward, and it gives us what we're looking for. It has an impact on what goes on in schools, the operation of schools, without question. But that, there's a way to be able to do that, and let's have that conversation that says the towns will not support it. And it
The
can, we get
majority
them
of
to
the town's gonna try to do I agree with you, Pete. The majority of the town's gonna try to go for this 5-year plan, Austin. What have you talked to your peers? What's everybody thinking?
So I think the
Good question.
general consensus of, I think, where the rest of the towns are, everyone is pretty close to being, if not already, up against it. And I think they're all having similar discussions that we're having tonight in terms of how much, how long. And that's why I think we've been also kind of asking the district administration where they think things will be. And that informed, I think, my projections over the next few years that you see. Now, obviously, things are subject to change, right? Because even the superintendent will say, I can recommend something, and if the school committee decides to do otherwise, that's their game. But, I feel confident, and at least what he's going to present to the school committee is what I presented tonight.
So the other towns, Austin, doing a projection like this?
I think they have their own models. It's, I know Paxton has a financial forecast, Holden has one. I'm not sure the other two what they do, but
I'm just thinking that if they have, I mean,
I don't know what their bottom lines are.
yeah, but if are they projecting a deficit, if you will, if you wanna look at the override as being a deficit?
At the
Are they
budget,
projecting an override for the next 5 years?
at the budget roundtable, a number of the towns, I would say at least half of the towns were talking about an override. And to varying degrees.
Okay.
Some were looking for a larger corrective and some were looking for just kind of a plug for this year, maybe into next year or whatever. But that's kind of the community specific piece.
And no one has presented their budgets yet, right? So
Right.
maybe it's like who shoots first kind of thing, but
Is it unrealistic that the school shouldn't already have a budget to you?
You brought that up?
yeah, I mean, depends on the community of the
half.
district. Some, I've seen some school districts that have already recommended their school budget. Some have not.
I think the regional schools and are more at the whim of the state budget, and so I think for the regional schools, it's trickier to have a true budget because there's a lot more factors on the state funding side than individual community schools.
So I'm gonna use the Darrenism. They took out our ankles a couple of years ago. They're already hit us in the knees, and by the end of this, they're gonna take out our hip. We're gonna be crippled here. And I don't know what they're working their way up. And we're not getting, any of these projections aren't getting better. So without someone going down there and saying, you guys gotta stop, or you guys gotta do this, or whatever, we're in trouble. And unfortunately, it's gonna be bad.
But it's not, who is it that's gonna have to go down there and to say that?
Well, I think Austin and no, but they all go down there and they have a great meeting with them.
Yeah.
I don't know that it gets anywhere.
Well, but that's the point is.
We all just yell at each other in a very nice voice.
Like you said, I mean, you can say this, the superintendent can agree 100% with the towns, but it's up to the school committee.
Well, so, but the point here is that it's really up to the towns. The school committees can say, the superintendent can say, yes, absolutely, we're gonna be real cautious and make sure that we're not damaging the towns. And goes to the school committee, and the school committee says, we want our money, we're gonna get our money. But the towns are going to say, no.
Even if they go to the 1/12 budget, we still lose an ankle. You know what I'm saying? Is we're not gonna go up to the knees and the hip, but we're still gonna we're halfway mid-calf.
Well, but it's going
If it goes to 1/12, we're in trouble.
But it's going to give us the opportunity to do something less significant in the town budget.
If
Perhaps.
Why perhaps?
The problem comes in is they do something that the town cannot do. They are fabulous at getting the word out.
Oh, you mean
It goes home and every children's backpack, there is reverse phone calls, there is everything.
Yeah.
Do you know we're gonna have to cut all foreign language, all music, all this? Do you remember the year that they all got up with their things and had prepared speeches?
Oh, yeah.
And we showed them what it meant.
Yeah.
And nobody cared.
Yeah, I remember all the chairs sitting down going into Glenwood. All the chairs with the
Yep.
signs on saying
So,
this is gonna be.
I mean, in the end, they do something that we as a town cannot do.
No, and I understand that. I understand that, except that if we go ahead and we say to them, we can't afford it, if the town says we can't afford it, they may say, listen, you got it, we're gonna close down all these languages. But if the two towns say, sorry, no, then they're back. Now, agreed.
And what they do is they make it go to the less of the one, and then they screw the fifth. That's what they do. I wish I could say that anything is going to change. It's not, because they're looking out for educating the students, and it's important.
Okay.
and I respect them for that.
I do.
All right, so
What?
we're really in a situation where we're saying, override.
I mean,
It isn't over.
Margaret's
That's it.
been, since Margaret was here, she's been telling the superintendent, here's what our new growth is. Just take the new growth. Just take the new growth and of all 5 towns and just increase by the new growth. And how many years ago was that now? I mean, when you think about how many years and we all sit in these meetings and we all have these conversations. But then when we get up in front of the 200 people that are at town meeting,
But contractually,
Optimistically.
they can't do new growth. It would still be, they would
I
lose.
agree, because of the health insurance and all that.
So,
I mean, those of you who are parents, you get the calls, you get the pieces of paper, you get the hard press. I know I get them sent to me.
So, if we're.
They do a really good job of it.
Provide Austin with a direction. It sounds to me we're providing them with the direction for an override. Some number, pick a number, $2 million? $5 million?
I don't think we can pick a number right now.
Well, he's gonna have some number.
Well, I mean, Austin, tell what, coming out of tonight, knowing that it's leaning towards an override and the number and length of time is still up for consideration, knowing that the school is having their budget roundtable in a couple weeks. I just sent to you and Tamika the Shrewsbury stuff if you wanna find additional information. I'll try to connect with Shrewsbury people at MMA next week, as well. But if there's, then it sounds like then we begin the real conversation. Jen, I think it asked for a level services budget, what that would look like in the projections, and then we begin the real conversation as to what that number and length of time is.
Okay.
And the education piece. I don't know, correct, like,
Yeah, I think that's pretty, so really what we're hoping is some consensus and direction so we can meet with town departments to, tell them about this discussion, what happened tonight, so if the direction is to move towards an override, to modify the budgets to make them sufficient for level services, we can get you that new number. And in compliance with that timeline, at least present the town operating budgets. I believe it's, Lord, I'm losing a little bit, February 3rd, for a proposed date, that would be to the
February
select board. And then the finance committee would be on
13th.
the 13th, if that works for the committee. But if it didn't go that way, the other would be a cut budget, so we need a little bit more time to modify those. But I think that we could work with departments to, on an accelerated schedule, to get what their additional resources needed for a level services budget.
I don't know that Darren's thought is the finance committee. We can talk about it, but we're not supposed to make recommendations of this we're not, that's a selectman's job.
but I think,
Well, ultimately, and the reason why I want you here tonight is because one, your names are on the budget book, and still, even with the new bylaws, you folks make recommendations to town meeting, so I don't wanna get too close to town meeting.
No, right.
To where you guys are just seeing
The
this
tough
budget,
decisions reside in the 5 of you now, instead of the 7 of us.
but you're still involved, right? I.
Oh, no, we're involved, but I mean, we're
And I
not
wanna
the.
Not
make
our
you-
decision.
I want, exactly, yeah, I wanna make you fully aware of where we are, because I feel it's important and I wanna work with you. Because I also do want you folks to be a part of this process and on board where we are, so we're not, Austin, finance team, select board, and finance committee are all on the same page. I think it's important that we are a unified body going to town meeting.
my other question is, the last, when we did the override a couple years ago, all town departments were supportive of it and helped with the outreach and education. We had FinCom did a fabulous job with the outreach meetings and inviting different department heads in throughout and everything. You might not have this answer tonight, but do you have a sense from department heads if there would be that kind of unified support of some sort of override, knowing what the bottom line numbers are? Again, we're not saying a hard and fast number or length of time at this point, but just.
I would think you could almost say that they are gonna have to support an override. They don't have a choice. Every town department either supports an override. They have to. They're not gonna say, I understand what your question is, but they have no choice. They have to support an override.
To maintain service. But again, having just passed one, I don't have a lot of confidence that it's gonna go through, so I think we need to be prepared for what the alternative is.
Oh, well, so the alternative is cuts.
Right.
Do we really think that that's gonna get done?
If we don't pass an override, we don't have a choice.
I mean, that's absolutely true. We're forced into it, as Darren was saying, that they have to support. we're forced into it, there's nothing we can do about it. But geez, I don't know that anybody's gonna stand up and say, we was hoping for that,
Oh, yeah.
all
No,
these things
absolutely not.
cut.
For years, we've always given them the choices.
Oh,
So
sure.
that they can see the choices.
Yeah.
Here's where we are with this, here's where we are with this, and that way they can make an educated decision. So yes, that is uncomfortable, yes, that is a lot of work. But I think that's something we didn't do last time. And that was the decision, was not my decision, I was against it. I believe that you need to show the people, if you don't pass it, what it will mean. Because I think Paxton did that and they had a hard time. So I think you have to show them, and I mean, no disrespect, but 180 pages is too much to go through to see that. I think it's easier and more concise.
You did present 2 budgets at the last, for the $2 million override, and so did Paxton.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so.
That's what I'm saying, a cut, and then I also wanted one without using so much.
Last year, though, we didn't have, the override wasn't last year, it was the year before.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, I misunderstood, I thought you said that we
But
didn't.
that's the thing, we gotta show what's gonna hit with the cuts.
Yeah,
Regardless of what in my opinion, that's how you have to sell it. That's, because if you don't, in my opinion, people need to see it.
the hard and fast numbers, not just here, it's gonna be bad, they need to see how bad it's gonna be.
So the direction to Austin is override, service level, this is the numbers. If that fails, then these are the cuts that we're gonna make. That's your task.
Well, and I'm not even, again, I don't even know what we'd be looking at or agreeable to as far as an override number. Just because I see a level service budget doesn't mean I'm gonna be comfortable agreeing to that X amount as an override.
Right.
There might still be room for some cuts, but
And then we gotta figure out that 1 year, 5
Right.
years, you know, what are we doing? Are we
But
doing it every year? This is gonna be a tough sled.
It is, and I agree, I mean, but again, looking at the forecast, we're not gonna have a choice at some point. So we might as well bite the bullet and start talking about it now. But what that actual number is and how long, I don't feel comfortable commenting on right now.
Right, that's what I was just gonna say. I agree with you, we gotta talk about this, but I'm not saying a word about it, about one way or another, because I don't know facts.
Right.
We have, nobody in this room knows anything more than projections. When we can hone this down, then we can, I think we gotta think long-term that we're gonna have to do an override.
Yes.
And I think we've given them some direction of what kind of budgets we wanna do, but I don't think we have any numbers to say, I mean, is the selectman gonna support a $10 to $15 million override? I don't know.
Right, but isn't that what we're asking Austin to do, is to.
Well, as soon as he gets his budget numbers, he really can't do it now. Cause is it 10 or is it 15?
Well, either way,
I don't
I
know.
mean, even if we do something like a $10 million override, we're not saying go crazy for next fiscal year. I would still say we're level service funding.
At maximum level servicing.
Right.
At minimum, if we're going for an override, then it's level funded. Ideally, we're getting to a level services.
Right.
So that we can maintain that.
Right.
But
Especially because I think the FY '24 override that was supported by both bodies was restoring town services and getting them to the level of staffing and resources that they needed. So essentially, it's kind of level services from FY '24 through those years.
Absolutely.
Because, and that was a big
As
thing,
long as
is
we go
making sure
forward,
departments
I
have
think
what
a
they need, right?
consensus here would be that we think that, like Jen recommended, level services.
Yeah.
And then we gotta get some higher numbers on the school committee date and.
Or maybe the way to word it is the override that passed a couple years ago, that was more of a corrective. We didn't use that word before, but
To bring it back
to
to
bring
where
it
it
back
should
to
have
where it,
been.
yes.
I would almost
But
say
not accounting
restorative.
for-
I would
yeah,
almost say
that's a-
restorative versus corrective, because it wasn't really
Yes.
corrective, it was
That's a
just
good word.
restoring stuff to where we really should have been.
Not
Yeah.
accommodating
So
future growth
whatever we
or
do here,
inflation.
we all gotta have the same line.
Yeah.
We can't be
Communication needs to be
restorative,
the same, yes.
supportive, this one, that one. It is gonna be, if we're gonna go forward with this, it's we will back you guys up, but you kind of make the hard choice to give him direction.
You're gonna have to look at the senior population as well. In other words, the senior population is the one that's gonna have to put a big piece of the bill that they don't really feel that they can support.
Well, we're gonna give you $100 off.
That's the problem.
Last fall, a friend of mine and myself got into commiserating about finances and so on and so forth, and so we got to talking about it and came up with the idea of pooling our resources, and I'll move to OCAM. What? Sorry about that. I'll move to OCAM, all right? But I mean, this is just one angle that people are gonna be looking at and thinking about, and what they can do and where they can go and whatever
it's
else
just
comes down
seniors.
to it.
I don't think it's just seniors. I'm sorry to say that. I don't just think it's just the seniors. I think there's a lot of people that can't afford this.
I won't argue
Unfortunately, we
the
have a
point.
pretty good per
I'm
capita
just saying,
income
I
in
think
Rutland.
of the seniors,
this is
believe
something
me.
that went on
But
between
I
somebody and
know-
myself.
You know, the worst part is, and Austin can speak to this, we're a pretty rich community.
Yeah,
And we're per capita, we're not that many steps behind Holden.
right.
So,
I'm saying, we just had a
oh,
discussion.
no,
That was all there
no.
was to it.
You got what you needed from us?
So I,
Oh, do I?
Yeah,
Does he like what he wants, come from us?
right.
select board, before we adjourn, I didn't realize, well, I forgot that we need a motion to sign and post the warrant as well, because we did the recommendations. So if someone would make a motion to sign and post the warrant.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay, roll call.
Matt's and I.
Whitman, aye.
That's what you needed, right?
And then, sorry, Austin, Donna, do you feel, I mean, it's on our agenda, on the select board's agenda for Tuesday to continue this conversation. Obviously, we're down 2 members tonight anyway. This was a much more in-depth conversation on the select board side, but I truly feel we need the guidance and support of FinCom, and to your point, if we're doing this, it has to be a unified front. As much and if not more than the previous one, and FinCom did a great job with that, so and really including the schools and everything as well.
I guess we gotta know how big that pill is.
We don't know
we're
what
gonna have to swallow.
it is yet.
We don't know what that pill is to swallow yet.
Right.
Austin's done a real good job getting it real close, but until the school committee has a meeting on,
And then the only thing I'm gonna say to all of you over in Selectmen, you guys all decide how the contracts go. You have to keep this in mind every single year when you're signing a contract. Because these things in the past have been signed and then left in our laps to have to make the cuts. So you gotta think of these things. I know they sit in front of you and I understand that, but you gotta look at living within our means too. Because they can't get the big raises, because without getting the big raises in the taxes.
school committee on the,
27th.
January 27th.
we don't have that.
It's, oh, sorry, 3.
Oh.
It's Monday, it's up here.
Are we ready for?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the finance committee
Second.
meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Roll call for that, I don't think, right?
No,
Is there any other business to come before the select board tonight? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Roll call.
Matt's and I.
That's right.
Whitman, aye. 8:10. Thank you.